Hello, I'm Shayan, and before we get into the tutorial, let us take a look at the outline of this video. The tutorial is divided into 3 parts. In this part, we will deal with the modeling. Part 2 for shading and texturing. In part 3, we will work on the animation and final rendering. The modeling process has been divided into 4 phases. You can download the model after each phase. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can find the link to these files in the description below. In this video, we start with the reference images and then we work our way up from the sole of the shoe till the laces. Then, to finish off the video, we work on mirroring and sculpting. Open up a new Blender file, press N on the keyboard, click on View, and here we will change the focal length to 100. Select the camera and the cube and then delete it with X. The first step will be to add reference images and to align them properly with each orthographic view. So let's go to the top view. By the way, I'm using the accent graph button on the keyboard to access all these views. So let's go into the top view. Press Shift A, Image, Reference. I have them under here. You can find the link to these reference images in the YouTube description, and these belong to Amazon.com, so I don't own any rights. Rotate it with R, press 90 on the keyboard to rotate it at 90 degrees. Go into the Object Data Properties, select Side to be front, and uncheck Display Perspective checkbox. So yeah. Now we'll do the same with all the other views. Left, front. You can see that this front image is not scaled up properly. You can match it up with the lines of the other images. Then the bottom. Rotate it. This time -90 to rotate it at -90 degrees. Now we have the reference images lined up properly. So that's how you set up reference images in Blender, and now let's move on. Let's go to the bottom view, add a plane with Shift A, Mesh, Plane, Tab to go into the edit mode. You can select with left click, with shift click you can select multiple vertices, R to rotate, G to translate, and S to scale. You can use all of these transformations and lock them to certain axes, like you can isolate the movement. Press S and then press the isolation axis like X, then it only scales along X. Or you can press G and then you can press Y to move along that axis. You can also add edge loops using Ctrl R. You can add more using the scroll on your mouse. To confirm, left click twice. Now we will kind of align the plane using these techniques to the shape of the sole as in the reference image. We will try to keep it close, but not exactly, because this image is not completely orthographic. Click on the modifier properties and add a subdivision surface modifier. Set the subdivisions to 3. Now you can edit it further. I think I will go with this one for now. Let's compare it with the other reference image. So I will go to the top view, and as you can see, it doesn't really seem right. So we will adjust. I'm happy with the shape of the sole, and we should now start working towards the other parts. In the viewport, you can use the accent curve button and use the view selected option to pivot around an object. It's the same as using del. You can also use Alt middle click. These all do the same functions, just Alt middle click does not zoom into the object as the other ones. In the edit mode, you can change to vertex select, edge select, or face select. It's inconvenient to use all these icons all the time, so you can use 1, 2, and 3 on the keyboard. You can use them in combination with Shift. Then you can select multiple of those. And by the way, these 1, 2, and 3 are on the keyboard right above the letters, not on the numpad. Let's go into the left view. Press G along the Z axis, bring it down. Then into the wireframe mode using Z. Make sure you have X-ray on here. Alt Z is the hotkey. Now we will just try to align it. Select the whole thing with A, go into the left view. Press E on the keyboard to extrude. Then we need to match it up as much as possible. Now we will add in an edge loop along the middle of the mesh and then scale it up. We'll go into the edit mode and you can double click on an edge to select the edge loop. Now you can see all the faces are also selected, so we don't want that. So deselect with Alt A, press 2 on the keyboard to change to edge select, and then you can select the edge loops properly. Press Shift E to add grease. Same goes for the outer edge. Select, right click, shade smooth. Maybe the crease on the upper loop is way too much. Perfect. Go into edit mode, select this face select mode by pressing 3 or clicking here. Shift D to duplicate, press P on the keyboard, separate by selection, tab into the object mode. This is a new object. Go into edit mode and now you can shape it. Let us take a look at the shoe cap and we will try to align it with the top view. Try to make it as close while also maintaining the shape of our original base model. So now let's add some depth to this. We'll use the solidify modifier for that. And it's always a good idea to use a modifier instead of actually extruding the geometry, because you can always go back and tweak the modifiers. Now we will add a solidify modifier. The thickness parameter here defines how thick it would be. And we don't want too much depth because it will be hidden anyways. Select the sole, press tab, double click on the edge to select the edge loops. We will deselect the unnecessary vertices. Shift D to duplicate, then hit P on the keyboard to separate it by selection. Now just scale it in a little bit with S, along the sides with S, then isolating it along the X axis, press X. Now we want to bring this vertex here, also keeping it on the surface. So to do that, use snap tools, click here and it will be enabled, and in this drop down you can select face, then it will snap to this face. Pressing G on the keyboard and it just snaps. The keyboard binding is Shift Tab. Now extrude the whole thing along Z axis, pull it up. We will go into the left, turn on X-ray, and just like previously, we will align it. Make sure you're selecting the front and the back vertices. We will add a solidify modifier. Click here. It moves it up the modifier stack. It adds the solidify modifier, and then it's a new mesh. So the subdivision modifier is applied after the fact. So the other way, you will have some unsubdivided geometry. Let's move on and make adjustments. Let us add plane. Now let's get done with the modifiers beforehand. Adding the modifier solidify, then the subdivision surface modifier. Make sure the thickness is alright. Subdivisions level 3. Before we start working on the shoelace, since it is a little bit complicated, let us first get done with all the minor little things like the border along the shoe and all those little stuff. Let's get them done and out of the way. Then we can focus solely on the shoelace. Let's add that little bit of relief in the front. So press E while you have them selected. Move it just a little bit. If you switch to object mode, you will see there's a very slight bit of relief in there, but it's not very prominent. So what we need to do is we just need to add grease here. Switch to edge select mode. Select these edges and apply a grease of 1 unit. And the same thing for these. You can add in another edge loop here. I'm happy with this. Let's go into the wireframe mode. Density does get a little bit higher along these, but it does not hamper the topology that much. So let's keep it that way. Same thing from the back here. Finally, there's another relief kind of thing on the quarter of the shoe. So for this one, we will have a slightly different approach. Over here on the modifier stack, you can see we have the solidify modifier. So we do not need to extrude essentially. Even if we do extrude, it really takes away volume from the inside. So that doesn't work out for our example. So instead what we are going to do is, this time we will actually duplicate it. Press Shift D to duplicate, press Y to isolate the movement to the Y-axis, and then pull it slightly above so that it looks like it's still attached to the quarter. Press Ctrl Shift Z on your keyboard and it will toggle the overlays. It's the same as using this button up here. Still move it around while having a very clear view of what is going on. Now we will add in the border kind of thing along this line. Firstly, I will show you how to use curves. Shift A, curve, Bezier. If you hit tab to go into the edit mode, you can see that you have the handles here. You can rotate and scale individual handles. You can select the ends of each handle. So now let's add in the curve. Press Shift A, curve, Bezier. Go into the edit mode with tab. Now we will increase the resolution, add some depth to it, just a little bit. Now delete the curve while in edit mode. Press X, vertices. Click on this draw button. You can also access it with Shift spacebar, draw, or pressing T on the keyboard. Once you have this, press N on the keyboard and you have these tool settings. The relevant features for this task will be projection depth. Set it to surface. And that's pretty much it. What this does is, if you draw over a surface, it adds in a curve. Kind of like a shrink wrapped curve. But it all happens automatically. That's a huge time saver. Now you can use your mouse pointer to draw, but I'll be using a graphic tablet just to be a little bit precise. Now switch to select box. Now we just need to do some cleaning up. You can select the ends of two segments and press F to join them. So now let's do the other curve down below. Now I had a similar idea to use a curve for this one, but turns out you can do it much easier in a different way. Now could you have done that same thing for this curve? Maybe, but did not really work that well when I tried, because you have two separate objects here and it has to be at the intersection. So I think curve is the best way to go for that one, but for this one let's try this new technique. So it's very easy and straightforward. Just go into the edit mode. We need this edge loop, so double click, deselect the vertices that you do not need. For that I'm using C, and then deselecting using the middle click. Now all you need to do is just to duplicate it. Press P on the keyboard, selection. So you get a different object. Edit mode, select all the edges, pull it down a bit. That's where it is in the reference image. Extrude, Z-axis, pull it up. Now you have something to work with. So select it. We will add a solidify modifier for this, and it should be before the subdivision modifier. Adjust the thickness. Now you can hide the ends. Select the last edge and press E to extrude, and then we will just put it in. We will like to add in more cuts. I'm doing this with Ctrl R. We want two cuts here, but not all the way. So we will just use a knife tool instead of using edge loops. So press K, and you see the mouse changes to a knife tool. Keep clicking on the edges where you want a new vertex to appear. Press the space bar and it confirms it. We will repeat the same. As you can see, sharp angles here, so let us adjust that. The next step is to add vertical cuts. Press K again. This time, vertical cuts. Change to face select. Select all these faces. Press X to delete them, faces. And now you have these holes here and the topology hasn't been disrupted that much. Now we can manually go in and edit them to make them more circular and to make them more consistent. Now we will adjust the tongue of the shoe so that it does not obstruct any of the holes. Now we will repeat the same for the other side, and we have 2 more holes here. Select, go into edit mode, select this ring and then press Shift S cursor to select it. Go into object mode, press Shift A, mesh, torus, scale it down, shade smooth, add 1 level of subdivision using Ctrl 1. You can use the trackball rotation by pressing the R key twice, and then you can move it much more freely. Shift right click, Shift A, mesh, plane. I will hide the 3D cursor. Click on this drop down, disable 3D cursor. Now we have a better look of this. So select the plane and we will first add a solidify modifier, and then we will add a subdivision surface modifier, viewport, and render subdivisions to 3. Adjust the thickness, right click, shade smooth. So now we are ready. Go to the top view, tab to go into the edit mode, press 2 to go into the edge select mode, press G, position it right above the eyelets, bring it down just above the quarter. Now we'll extrude with E along the Z axis, X axis. I'm keeping it very rough right now, so don't worry about that, we'll be adjusting it. Adding a subdivision in the middle. I think we should go for a level 4 subdivision because it was looking a little bit jagged. We will repeat this process for the other parts of the laces, so we will be following a crisscross kind of tying pattern. That's what we are going for. So we are finally done with the shoe, but what we don't have is another shoe because sneakers come in pairs. Surprise! So I'll show you a quick and easy way to make a mirror image of this whole shoe, even when you have separate objects. Because if you select all of the objects, press Ctrl M on the keyboard for mirroring along X, it does not work. Things fall out of place and it doesn't really work because separate objects have their origins at separate places, so it does not really work that way. You can also use the mirror modifier, but that would be weird because these are all separate objects, and using the mirror modifier for each one of them will map those objects to different places, again according to their origins, so it does not really work either. So what we're going to use is a very simple method. Follow along with me. Just select all the objects, duplicate first, Shift D, press X and move along the x-axis so we can view it better. It does not mix with the original mesh. Scale it with S and type in -1 on the keyboard. Yes, it loses its orientation, but it actually mirrors the correct way. Scaling along each axis by -1. That creates mathematically a mirror image. Since it is scaling along all the axes, it does work and things do not fall out of places. What you only need to do now is press R to rotate along the x-axis, press X and type in 180 degrees, so 180, and you have a perfect mirror image of the other shoe. Let's make this scene look a little bit visually appealing. So let's click on this drop down, click on matte cap, select a matte cap, I like this one, add some cavity, shadows. Yeah, I like this. Right now, both the shoes look perfectly the mirror image of each other. In the real world, it must have some slight differences. So click on this sculpting layout here. Once you're in the sculpt mode, just randomly draw a few strokes here and there. Shift F to increase the strength, F to manipulate the radius. You can use Ctrl to actually push the surface inside. Now you need to go back to layout, select this one, come back to sculpting, repeat the same. Make sure you have the mirror turned off. So now we can say we are done with the modeling.